it's obvious this is a really exciting moment to be launching a speaker series about revolution and have revolutionaries come. On our way here, we passed a giant march of people going to where we're going to go in an hour. Troy Davis, obviously, very angry group. There's a lot of people who are very angry at a lot of things, and it's just a great moment to actually be talking about what we might be able to demand at this moment. And here today is somebody that is an idol of mine, of ours, who will talk about how they demanded things about 11 years ago and got them, and maybe some of the ways that they did that. And then we'll all head down to where revolutionaries are demanding things today and join them, because they need to be joined. And I'm super grateful, obviously, to the Hemispheric Institute, Diana, Marcial, and others for making this possible, for hosting this. We're doing this at the Hemispheric Institute in conjunction with the Center for Artistic Activism, also and with Not an Alternative, which is an independent activism art space in Brooklyn. And it's financed by the Dean of Social Sciences, so thanks to him. Let's see, so without further ado, I'll introduce Brian Farrell of Waging Nonviolence, which is an incredibly awesome website if you haven't been there, wagingnonviolence.org, about all kinds of nonviolent action and how powerful it can be. We will introduce this.
Welcome everybody to Revolutionaries Live. My name is Brian Farrell, and I'm also a student here at NYU, and I'm really pleased to say that my rather non-traditional interests in activism have really found a home for them here at NYU. And with the Yes Men and Yes Labs arriving here this semester, it's really a tremendous sign of recognition that students are typically the ones at the forefront of social and political change. If it's not evident from our own nation's history with activism, it can certainly be seen with the youth that are involved in the Arab Spring. So it's fitting then that tonight's speaker, and the first in this series, was a student revolutionary himself back in Serbia, where he helped form the student group Otpor that went on to play a really critical role in the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic almost 11 years ago. I want to use a quote from New York Times journalist Tina Rosenberg, who wrote an excellent book last year called Join the Club, that has 2 chapters really in depth on Otpor. And in it she describes our speaker by saying Ivan Marovic was one of 11 students at Belgrade University who met in the city cafe. They smoked, drank coffee, and hatched the unlikely idea that armed with the sensibilities of Monty Python's Flying Circus and some really great black t-shirts, they could topple Slobodan Milosevic, who by the time of his fall had more blood on his hands than anyone in Europe since Stalin. Ivan has gone on to train activists in major conflict regions around the world since then, and he's also developed a video game designed to teach strategies of nonviolent action. He's here tonight to talk about his role in Otpor and also the role of humor in creative activism. And as Andy mentioned a little bit later on, he'll lead us down to Liberty Plaza, where we will see some of the here and now revolutionaries that are occupying Wall Street. So, please welcome Brian Marovic.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for having me. It's a great honor to be here. And as my friend told me, Sinisha, who's one of the fellow Otpor activists, and we trained a lot of people around the world, and he said, like, you know what, there are 3 countries where we need to go in and help. These are China, Russia, and the United States. And I'm like, wow, you're really thinking big. So I'm gonna send him a message tonight saying that I have come to the United States. You take care of the other two. Okay, so I'm so happy to be here and to talk about. Let's say the topic is humor and revolution, and I really like the fact that we're going to talk about humor and revolution, because usually people think that revolution is a serious business and that there is no place for humor. However, what I'm going to show tonight, actually I hope I will, is to show that humor is actually essential in creating like a massive, broad-based, but still non-violent and popular movement that is going to bring about change. So let me first tell you a little bit about myself. I don't come from any activist, how shall I say, community. My parents were not activists at all. My parents detested politics. My grandfather was like a small town politician. He was a mayor of a small town, but that was before the Second World War. And my dad didn't want to do anything of that. And I didn't want to do any of that, and I didn't care about politics. And as, most good people that I knew didn't care much about politics. We were busy with partying. We were teenagers, or, our parents were busy with their professional careers, or going to the theater, or living an easy life. In the meantime, the good people were busy with good things, and the bad people took over the government. So Milosevic came to power, and we were like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" It's like the whole. I mean, we used to be the most free country in Eastern Europe. We could travel. We could like freely engage in arts and music and everything that ordinary people care, while the rest of Eastern Europe was under like the communist rule. And so in 1989, that whole Berlin Wall collapsed and they all became free, and we kind of ended up with a bad government, and actually like a really lousy one. And over the years, I actually realized that the reason why that happened is because good people were not in politics. They stayed out of politics. So what Otpor, the student resistance movement, tried to do during its existence is actually to bring these people back into the political realm and to try to kind of mobilize them, motivate them to fight and to bring down the regime. So we're talking about politicizing the unpolitical segment of the society, people like me. I got kind of caught in that. It was a little bit of, accident, and, I didn't really think. But there was a student protest that was going on in 1996, and I was a student at mechanical engineering. So, imagine, like, not really you wouldn't think it's an activist school at all. But mechanical engineering turned out to be like a hot spot of activism, because mechanical engineering allowed actually you to postpone the army for another 5 years, and because there was a war and we didn't want to go to the army to be drafted, so like all the people who wanted to avoid the draft, they went to mechanical engineering. So we had like this concentration of people who were like, we just didn't know, but we were there, and so we actually just discovered our true nature when the protest started, and we joined the protest, which lasted for 4 months, and it was marvelous. We were having street demonstrations during the day and parties during the night. I got mononucleosis as a result of that, and I met my current wife. That's another thing. But at the same time, we didn't make any political gains. It was a complete flop. After 4 months of daily demonstrations and huge energy, and we didn't go to lectures, we occupied the university building, and we lost a year of studies, but we didn't gain much. And so that failure actually helped us understand two things about, like say, two biggest mistakes that we made. First, we were focusing during that protest. Our activities were at the university, which is speaking to fellow students who were against the regime anyway, and to our professors who were veterans of 1968 demonstrations, student demonstrations. You know, back then they were students. So practically preaching to the choir. And we spent a lot of energy, you know, occupying the university building and trying to, you know, have activities there and all that stuff. While 100 meters down the road, the green market was fully functioning, people were going to work, and life was normal. And the second mistake that we made was that, you know, we kind of tried to rely on charismatic leaders. So we had one, you know, guy who was really handsome and girls liked him, and that wasn't me. So he was like our leader, and so we kind of put him in front, and he was like speaking publicly, and like people associated him with the protest. So after 4 months, he got a really good offer to join one of the political parties, and there he goes and becomes a successful politician. You know, and the students are left like, oh my God, you know, like, why did we invest all this energy into his career? Was this, you know, no way we're gonna go and do another protest. So we realized that, you know, we need to come out of the university. We need to talk to ordinary people, even to people that we may not like to talk to. And the second thing is that we need to have not a protest, but a movement, which means we need to channel that energy that was generated during the protest and to apply it over a longer period of time, maybe years, in order to make success. So that means that this has to be bigger than any one of us, and that means that we cannot have a leader. We have to have like a movement that is bigger than any person, and that's why we were brainstorming, and it was like one attempt after another, trying to make a movement. It didn't work, and so at one of the events that were a complete flop. After the event, we went to to discuss what to do next, and then somebody turned on the television, and it was summer of 1998, and the news came from Jakarta that students brought down Sukarto, and we were like, wow, we didn't know students can do these things. But that gave us actually, hope that we may be able to bring down Milosevic. So we created a movement, finally, after too much brainstorming, that was called Otpor, which means resistance. And the symbol that we used was a clenched fist. The reason why we did that was because we wanted to associate our struggle with the struggle against Nazi occupiers of Serbia during the Second World War. So we kind of thought that, there was very popular TV shows in the 70s when we were kids about the underground resistance movement against the Nazis. And so we wanted to associate ourselves with that movement and Milosevic with the German governor of Belgrade, who was the bad guy in the series. So we kind of modeled ourselves against that. But as soon as we made that, like, let's say, basic structure, and when we announced that, we're going to go for the removal of the regime, there was like 11 of us, and everybody thought that, we were crazy because we were announcing big plans, but there was no, there was no capacity, there was no organization, there was nothing. It was just 11 people. So then we actually figured out the first axiom of how to grab somebody's attention, and that leads us to the, topic of tonight, humor. When you have 100,000 people in the street, that's news, and everybody's going to report it. But if you have 100 people in the street, that's not news, and it's hardly newsworthy. But if you have 100 people in the street doing something crazy, well, that's news. But you have to do something crazy. And so what we did is like, okay, in the first phase, when we're still small, we're going to do crazy street theater. And it wasn't really something that we didn't do before. We did it back during the student protest. We were famous for street theater. For instance, we wanted our dean of the university to resign because he didn't support the students when they went on strike. So we went to search for him, because he was nowhere. He wouldn't issue a press release. He wouldn't say anything publicly. He just disappeared. And so we went to search for him. First, we went to the city zoo, and then we went to the observatory to look if he's on some other planet. Then we went to the underground subway to dig him up. And and finally, the climax of that, we went to one very famous fortune teller, and we organized a delegation. And she was like throwing cards, tarot cards. And the cameras were there, and so she told us you know what, your dean is going to resign in 10 days. And by some extent, he really did resign in 10 days. And this woman got like huge money later because it was her advertising. But for instance, this episode was reported in the magazine called The Twilight Zone, which is a magazine of about paranormal activities. And so there is a type of people, it's a huge crowd that reads these magazines, and they're totally not political. But they learned about the protest and our demands and everything by reading an article about this fortune teller that actually managed to guess the exact date of the resignation of the dean. And this is where actually I think we realized the importance of street theater. Talking to people who are not politicized in a non-political language. Trying to bring the message, the political message, down to the everyday, spoken in everyday language, down to the street where people are actually living their lives. Not on television or newspapers where they can see some other people doing things. But this is where they do their things. So bringing politics to them. So when we made Otpor, we said, you know what, we're going to do street theater, but now we're going to go with street theater 2.0. So it's not just going to be, funny. It has to be engaging. It has to kind of bring people to participate. And so we started with street theater. We call them actions, and we had a slogan because a lot of politicians would say, when they are asked about something, they would say, well, I think that this should be done this way, and I think that, and so our slogan was, we don't think, we act. So this was but it had a double meaning, but what essentially it meant is that, instead of thinking and issuing press releases and advocacy and that kind of stuff, we're going into the streets and we're doing street theater. And in that street theater, we were pretty much influenced by absurd theater of Monty Python Flying Circus and by Situationists. And Monty Python Flying Circus was something that we were watching when we were really small. That was in the late 70s, early 80s. And we wanted to have something like that, because that absurdity is going to reveal the absurdity of our political and social situation. So, for instance, one of the first things that we did was totally stupid, was throwing tomatoes, rotten tomatoes at political party billboards. It was just one guy throwing tomatoes, and people would walk by and yeah, that's a good thing, and then somebody would, approach, take a tomato and throw it. And it was just nothing. Then we kind of started to build on that, and then we had there was a solar eclipse that was expected, so we put a big model of a telescope in the main street, and so we asked people to look at the solar eclipse through the telescope, and when people looked through the telescope, on the other side there would be Milosevic's head falling down like a falling star, and so they would oh, look at this. Or we would put a full-size Milosevic picture and ask people to take a photo with the president, and that kind of stuff. So it was kind of, we're still kind of getting ready and trying to engage the people so they participate on this stuff. So then later, we went one step further, and we developed something that we called dilemma actions. And this is where not just that we engage the public to participate in the street theater, but now we're engaging the opponent as well. So they have to be part of the same street theater. I'll give you like an example, which is like the most famous one. It's the Barrel of Laughs, and this is in mid '99. So we're still small. We're maybe now in hundreds. You know, there's hundreds of us. We're still like a tiny organization, and we still need to do something crazy so people can hear about us. But we're still kind of afraid that if we step out too, you know, if we're too public, that there is going to be a crackdown and they're going to arrest us, and we're too small, so we cannot sustain that. So we're trying to kind of, you know, as they say, we're trying to have an intercourse without penetration. You know, so we would like to protest, but we would like to be away. You know, so so what we did is like we made this big barrel, and we put Milosevic's picture on the barrel, and there was a text on the barrel that says, collecting money for Milosevic's retirement. And please insert a coin. And then there was a baseball bat next to the barrel. And there was another line of text which said, if because of Milosevic's economic policies you don't have a coin, bang the barrel. And so we put this barrel in the middle of the street and we move away. And so people are passing by and like they read the text and somebody's, haha, look at this. And they bang the barrel. When they bang the barrel, more people hear, they show up. They read the text, they bang the barrel, and like after 5 minutes, there are like 100 people banging the barrel and reading it, like figuring out who did this, what's going on, you know, what's this all about? Like in a matter of minutes, the police shows up because they hear some noise and they're like, what's going on? You know, who put this barrel here? You know, and these people are like, we don't know. I mean, we just saw it here. You know, and so the police is like, what do we do? You know, okay, this is a source of trouble. Remove it, you know. So they take the barrel, we take the cameras, take a few shots, and then publish it as police arrested the barrel. And so this is what we call dilemma action. Whatever they do, they're going to make a mistake. That puts them in a dilemma. If they leave the barrel there, more people are coming, banging the barrel. The crowd is growing bigger and bigger. If they remove the barrel, they look silly. So whatever they do, they lose. And so the idea of the dilemma action, which was the next phase of the street theater, was to engage the opponent, to engage, in this case, the police, but not to engage them in like confrontational way. Because this dilemma action, and some others as well, is actually having, not just that we are having good laugh and like people are talking about it and, you know, and they are like, you know, enjoying themselves, but the police officers, when they leave the scene, with the barrel, of course, they are thinking, you know, why am I doing this? You know, why is the regime putting me in a silly position that I have to arrest barrels? I mean, I should be arresting criminals and I should be applauded for what I'm doing. I shouldn't be doing these silly things. So this actually erodes their how should I say, their trust they have in the wisdom of their leadership and in the regime. So this was the ripple effect, you know, on the other side. So engaging the opponent was the next phase. So if I can say that humor played a role in our struggle, it did play a role in two ways. One way was that, you know, okay, let me put it this way. Like the classic theory of, you know, Gene Sharp, for instance, or David Hume before him, you know, that, you know, all governments actually rely on public trust and obedience of the subjects. And once this obedience is removed and once people become disobedient, the regime cannot sustain itself because, you know, as Etienne de la Boissy said in 16th century, you know, the ruler has only two arms. So the arms that he uses to hit you are your own arms, you know, never his own. So the idea that, you know, it was around for quite a while, and it was, you know, the last, how shall I say, incarnation of that idea was in Gene Sharp's books in the 70s, that, you know, once you remove this support, the regime will not be able to sustain itself. Once different pillars of support, like police and the army and bureaucracy and all that stuff, when they stop supporting the regime cannot function anymore. So So that was certainly true in our case, but there was one thing that was often underestimated or overlooked by these theoreticians, and it is very much evident for instance, in Egypt this year, and that is the volatility of human emotions when we talk about large groups of people. We have, in classic status quo situations where change is not imminent, you have the nation that lives in apathy or even in despair, that has high fears of future, fear of change, fear of uncertainty of what future may bring, or very specific fear of repression and violence. And then at the same time, you have very low enthusiasm. You have apathy. You have like people who believe that nothing can be done, that the politicians are all the same, and even when we change the politicians, that the system is going to be the same. So there is like a lack of hope completely, and so when people like look at the country or at the nation, and they see this like high apathy and low enthusiasm and high fear, and they say like nothing can be done here. Look at this mood. Mood is really terrible. But actually, small things that are started by small groups of people, like we did, and like people in Egypt did, they accumulate this energy, and enthusiasm suddenly goes up, the fear suddenly goes down, and you enter a revolutionary situation out of nowhere. It's not there, you don't see it, but actually it was there. It was all the circumstances were there. It was just the emotional situation was suppressing the change. So in that sense, this is something that theoreticians of nonviolent action often overlook, is this emotional component, is that you need to lower fear and you need to increase enthusiasm in order to bring about change, in order to have people believe that the change is possible. And they, by doing whatever they will be doing, that they're going to help bring this change. So humor actually helped us a lot to achieve this, because one of the first things that humor achieved was to lower fear. First, people used to go to demonstrations quite regularly in Serbia. It was a small group, relatively small, not enough to challenge the system, but they were really persistent, and they were really, protesting regularly and fighting with the police and all that stuff. But the problem was that, it was like a self-defeating strategy, And as my friend Srđa Popović from Otpor says, we have two groups of victims in this struggle. One group of victims is wearing blue jeans. Another group of victims is wearing blue uniforms. So why should we have a war between victims and victims? And this is exactly what was going on, and what we wanted to avoid. So when we started doing street theater and we started using humor as means of spreading the political message, one of the things that we managed to achieve was to lower this antagonism and confrontation level with the police, because they had the same problems, obviously, that the rest of the population had, just that they perceived, especially students, but also other protesters, as somehow troublemakers, and but actually what we try to do is actually to show to them that we are on the same side and we shouldn't be fighting. And humor helped, because they can appreciate a good joke, especially because it's a joke about the regime, not the joke about them. And another thing is that ordinary people felt safe to come out and express themselves, and to use the street theater themselves as means of communicating their grievances. So we kind of introduced that as a cheap way of doing political messaging to people who are not political. So there is one thing that I read. Now I'm going to sound like a this is going to sound like a real lecture. One thing I read in some evolutionary psychology book by Steven Pinker, I think, is that, you know, I love his theories on, you know, evolutionary origins of filthy words and swears, and then he has also evolutionary theory on humor, you know. And he has one point there is that, you know, he says that, you know, you should, when you look at different jokes, they all have one thing in common. And in jokes, what happens is that you have a person who has certain authority or certain position, let's say, in hierarchy. And then by the end of the joke, this position or this authority is revealed as fake. And this is why people laugh. Because like perceived authority is revealed as a fake authority. And this pretty much goes with every joke. You know, stereotypical jokes about you know, different, you know, I don't know, mother-in-laws and I don't know, priests, and you know, they always at the end of the joke, you know, it turns out that what we usually perceive about that particular trade or about that particular type of person is actually not true. So this was this humor that we used in our political struggle had actually the same kind of structure, because it's a natural structure. It had to show that, you know, how we perceive things as normal citizens, actually this is not true, and that the system that we take for granted as the system that we live in is completely crooked, and that needs to be changed. So joking about it was actually essential, because then people would understand that, because that's like an easier way to explain that to them than if you know, try to theoreticize or to explain in political terms and all that stuff. So, for instance, you know, there was total uncertainty about the elections, and so the government would, you know, call for early elections. That's like a European practice in general, to have early elections, you know, whenever they feel comfortable. But in our case, you know, the early elections were called whenever they felt, you know, they could win, and they could rig them, and then, you know, there were always speculations that, you know, regular elections will never take place, and so this was actually a deliberate attempt by the regime to you know, spread apathy and despair, because like, why should we fight? You know, do you see that the whole system is rigged anyway? So we kind of, to make a joke out of it, you know, we organized like a huge like a Native American rain dance, calling for elections to come, you know, because like that's the only thing you can do. And it was actually like a simple way to tell the people that we have a problem with our election system, that is, you know, that, you know, they were changing, what is the name, the like voting districts, you know. They make like, this was like funny, they make a survey, and they see where they are getting more support, and then they rearrange the voting districts so they could win elections. So it was totally crazy. One day I vote in one district, the next elections I vote in another district. It's just ridiculous. So to kind of show that this is like a joke, we would use something like that. And then, you know, there was a lot of you know, construction that was going on. So we were doing our own construction works, and so opening bird houses and like doing all the ceremonies of, you know, that the politicians usually do when they open like a big bridge or something. That we would do the same thing, and then what was good about that is that people would join, and then they would, you know, participate, and they would, like ordinary citizens, would become part of this whole theater, and that actually helped a lot to kind of reach out to people who are usually not. And so then, you know, you start doing crazy things, and I'm going to give you a few more examples. For instance, there was in one town south of Belgrade, like maybe 60 miles south of Belgrade, there is, on the hill overlooking the town, there is a big monument of one World War II hero who was shot by the Germans. And before he was shot, he raised his hands like this, and he yelled, according to the legend, "Long live the Communist Party of Yugoslavia." And so they shot him. And so they put like a big monument on top of that hill, and local government officials from that town would, every year on particular date, they would go and put flowers under that monument, you know. And so we went. This was like our extreme sport unit of Otpor did the following action. They had like bows and arrows, and they went there and they tied like a big piece of cloth with a clenched fist to an arrow, and they shot it over his shoulders, pulled back, and tied a knot. And so it was like around 4 o'clock in the morning before sunrise. And so this huge monument with a huge clenched fist and saying resistance, you know, was there. And so these government officials came with flowers and all that stuff. And they're like, oh my God, and cameras were there. It's like, we're not putting flowers in front of a fist, you know, somebody has to do something. So what do? They call the police. The police shows up and they're like, wow, it's too high. We don't know how to bring it down, you know. So they call the fire department, and so the fire department comes up, and they finally remove the clenched fist. It was around like 11 or something, you know. By that time, the whole town is talking about it, and it's like it's a practical joke, and these kind of things, these are not threatening things. These are not things that are insulting to the other side, which was important, but they're actually, they put them in the silly position, which is actually not our intention. It's their, they are putting themselves in that silly position. If they just put those flowers on that, they would never, but somehow they think that they shouldn't be doing that. And so, it's another example of a dilemma action. What do? Whatever they do, they're gonna lose. So what I was telling you now is what we were doing when we were, 11, and then, 111, and then 1,111. And so this was still a small organization. We tried to federalize the movement, and this is this is one advice that I'm giving to people wherever I go. And I think it's actually, probably in organizational terms, I think our most important discovery that we made, I don't say that we did it first, but we discovered this on our own. We didn't know that before. First, we tried to do democracy, and because we were operating on a shoestring, and because we were operating under repressive conditions and, lack of communication and stuff, democracy didn't work. We couldn't agree on anything. Because it was just impossible, and especially consensus was impossible. So, then we were thinking like, so what? So what do we do if we now try to make some like sort of authoritarian rule inside the movement? So what's the point? Then we're like, why are we doing this? We kind of have to be different. So what we finally discovered as the mode of operations that proved to be the most resilient was a federalized structure. So instead of agreeing on everything, we actually allowed local branches to have full autonomy and full responsibility for their actions. And so they didn't need to coordinate with us, with the movement headquarters in Belgrade. When they were organizing an action, they just need to follow like the basic guidelines that, this has to be nonviolent, this has to be, aimed at the regime and Milosevic, and to kind of follow the basic strategy. But once this basic strategy is followed, everything else is up to them. They can actually create their own actions and organize locally without any interference from our side. Help is always there, but we weren't telling them what to do, and they didn't ask for permission. That actually, opened like a huge, well of ideas and the pool of ideas and the huge, how shall I say, wave of activities that were happening all around the country. Another thing that we did, which is also organizational, and I think it's also important, together with the federalized structure, is that when we took new people in the movement, we would first take them through a 5-day training course. It was 5 days, 2 hours every day, usually like around 7 in the evening, when they finished their daily obligations. And they would go through a training course to learn first what Otpor is about, how we do things. Then the second day would be how to write a press release, how to communicate to the press, how to, how to actually be a spokesperson. And then the next day, we would lead them to through a training how to organize your branch, how to keep contacts, how to check them up, how to, keep in touch with them, how to, make sure that they're, okay if there is an arrest or something. So these are kind of networking skills. And then on the next day, they would learn how to organize a street action, and how to make a flyer, how to do this. And then on the last day, we would bring this new group that joined Otpor like 5 days before that. We would bring them together, and then we would tell them, okay, now you make your first action. And they would go and do an action on their own. These are like freshmen. These are people who just joined the movement without our, interference. They would do an action, and only then they are allowed to join the local branch. But once they join the local branch, we discovered the problem with existing organizations is when you join an organization, you're like so happy about it, and you want to help and all that stuff. You go there, everybody knows everybody, and they're into like their own daily routines and all that stuff, and you're sitting and you're just lost because you don't know who's John and who's Jack and why John said this to Jack, and you're like in the middle of a discussion and you don't know what's going on. And then like after a few weeks, if you don't give up, you're going to learn who's who and what's going on. So we wanted to avoid that. So by doing these trainings, we actually had people who would show up on the first meeting of their local branch and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I did this action 2 days ago. Did you hear about it? And they were like, yeah, we heard about it. That's crazy, or, that was fantastic or something. And so they would get appreciation right away. And what we tried to make when we built the movement was not a movement as a political organization which is fighting for issues, and because really it's not about issues. It's about people and their personal experience and their personal status in their local community. Because people join these kind of movements not to be, not because they think some political idea is really worth fighting for, but deep down why they're doing that is because they want to do something and to be applauded for that, to be appreciated by their community, that what you are doing is really great. And so what we were trying to do is to make a movement which is a venue where people can express their creativity, where they can bring their grievances, bring their ideas, bring their political philosophy, bring their, whatever. And then in the movement, together with others, turn that into political action that is aimed at ordinary people in the street, and that can actually, communicate with the ordinary people. So this is another important part of this, is that movement is also personal experience and personal transformation for each and every participant. And broad movements that are involving a whole nation, they bring this experience and this transformation to the whole nation. No matter what the legislative, political, or any other solution or result we have. I actually noticed that when I talked to Reverend Jim Lawson, and we were talking a lot about. I really love that guy. He's great. He's even at his age. I would like to be like him in his age. He's like full of life and he's full of energy, and what he actually, kind of said, and that was pretty much on the things that I experienced was, how people who were part of the lunch counter sit-ins, what kind of personal transformation that meant for them, like how they saw themselves after that. Not what was the political outcome, and and what that meant for the black community in the United States with the Civil Rights Act and all that, but what that meant for them personally. How they saw themselves, how they saw their role in the society, and how they saw their, what they should be fighting for. And this personal experience and personal transformation is also one thing that is, I think, very valuable and is often overlooked by theoreticians when they talk about movements. And I would like to emphasize that as well. So to go back now to, I was a bit serious now, but to go back to humor, and to kind of, I think, if I'm correct, we should be finished by 8 and then continue down there. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to, maybe have a few questions. I'm sorry I speak so much, but I didn't have. I had too much sugar, so that's the reason. So, but before I open the floor to questions, I would just like to add one more thing about revolution and humor and fun that has come out of it, and the really great experience that I personally had, and no matter what the political result was. And so, I often say that revolution is like sex. And somebody quoted me that I said that a revolution is like good sex. Yeah. So the thing is that, when we had our revolution, we thought that, this is going to be totally transforming. This is going to change things. Nothing is going to be like it used to be. And then, like, after some, few days, it looks like things are back to normal, and and then the disappointment begins. Well, we did make gains. Milosevic was brought down, but our lives were still bad. they didn't change. There was no war. That was good, but apart from that, things didn't change. And so some people started questioning, like, was it worth it? And so then we developed this metaphor as like, was the sex worth if you didn't marry the girl afterwards? So so in that sense, revolution is like good sex, and it will change some things. It won't change everything, but it's still worth doing it again. So let's open the floor to questions. Sir.
What was when you were 11, the number 11, and in those early events, how were you distributing the events? It sounds like you were filming them, and this is in 98, 97.
Yeah.
How were you disseminating?
Yeah, well, yeah, that was actually, when I compare at the height of our, so this is not in 1998, this is like when we were big. We had 4 digital cameras and 4 laptops. It was like, we had like, arrangements with some, students from faculty of film, and they were filming some of that. For instance, the fortune teller was filmed, but many of these things were not filmed because we didn't have that capacity. We didn't have mobile phones with cameras. So the main thing that was we were looking at local press that. Especially in small towns that didn't have news. They were poor, they didn't have reporters, they couldn't send reporters to Belgrade to report on big events, and they were hungry for news. So we would actually create news for them, and they were our biggest allies. These were, and magazines like the Twilight Zone, and magazines that were not political. So these were our means of communication. And we actually reached people who don't care about politics exactly because we use these means of untraditional means of communication. But I was thinking, imagine if we had, I have like a flip camera today, which is like, I don't know, like 50, 60 bucks now on sale. Imagine if we had like flip cameras and digital photography and mobile phones with cameras, in those days. Many of these things are now just memories because, nobody filmed them, and it's really a shame. Okay. And,
Yeah, I just want to know when you guys sort of like decentralize on local groups, right? So you let them do whatever they're capable of doing, right?
mm-hmm.
And then you guys give some sort of like a high level,
Yeah.
like a rules and instructions.
Yeah.
When they finish whatever the action they're doing, are they sort of like report back to you guys, and then sort of like go through some sort of like a analysis process or steps, and then like next time do this? Is that
Yeah. Well, yeah, there is. I mean, what we try to do is to establish a horizontal communication, and that was very important. We try to not that they report to us, like the founders of the movement, but they report what they're doing, make it public, so that other branches can come and give suggestions, and so to try to kind of to build on like this how should I say, group wisdom, because we may think this is a good idea, or maybe we can think this is a bad idea, but we may be wrong. And it's better to open it up to more people. So what we had was, there are a lot of small details here that I think are very important, and like hanging out with people. And we made sure that we hang out with each other, that we talk to each other, and that we spend some time with one another. Because this is where we can, get feedback and all that stuff. We had regular, obligatory meetings of the resistance leadership. It would usually happen during the night somewhere outside of Belgrade, a quiet location. We would sit down. This is like the founders, because we needed to maintain cohesion of the founding group. And then we would sit together at the table, and then we would tell each other everything that we, think about each other. So like completely get it out on the table. Because we felt that it's better to, settle this rather than, to have some internal friction or something that can later jeopardize the movement. So, we would have like our minute of truth, like what we think about each other. And sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's like you're really pleasantly surprised when people, have positive, things to say about you. But most of the time they're like really pissed, or they're, they don't like something that you're doing. And so we try to do that on every level, so that, that they sit and they talk to each other. And this was actually one of the most important elements in maintaining nonviolent discipline. Because we had our hotheads, and people who were saying, look what they did, now we should go and throw Molotov cocktails and that. But when they go to one of those sessions, and, when their ideas to use violence are revealed as fueled by their own internal insecurity or some other issues or something, and it turns out that what they're suggesting is not politically prudent or should be done at all, but it's actually the reason why they're suggesting that is something else. We actually eliminate this suggestion, and we go back to where we are. So kind of, talking to each other and having these like psycho groups, of like AAA, Alcoholics Anonymous, hello, I'm Ivan, and so this was actually, very, very important part of that. It's again one thing that is completely overlooked, because it's just, it's queer. It's like, it's not political analysis. What political analyst would talk about the importance of psychological sessions of? I mean, no sane political party is doing that. I mean, and at least I'm grateful we were insane.
Well, I think the thing that that this is telling me is the amazing amount of emotional intelligence or compassion or inclusiveness, which in a politics you see a lot of ego and you see a lot of posturing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how you guys started with that. Like, I don't know what was cohesive in your group or Eastern European or what that made you think like that, because that's not typical.
That's not typical Eastern European.
No, because
yeah.
No.
No, I mean, I mentioned the previous protest with our charismatic leader who became a politician. This was actually very devastating to us. You know, I'm still, I'm still kind of his friend. He's now like a, an MP and the leader of one liberal political party, European liberal, like centrist, neoliberal, and so, I saw him the other day, he's like walking around with two bodyguards, one in front of him, one behind him, and the bodyguard doesn't know me, and so I'm standing at the sidewalk, and the bodyguard is coming and like on the sidewalk, and I'm standing there talking to somebody, and he's like, "Move away, we want to pass," and I kind of over his shoulder, I'm saying like, "Chedo, hey, how are you? Who's this guy?" And then he realized that I know his boss, and he's like, "Oops," But this is the ego we're dealing with. This is like, it's even spreading to their bodyguards. Like they think they own the place. So and we really hated that from the very beginning. And we learned that if we are going to have that, we are going to die, and the movement is going to die with us, and it's going to be just a nice attempt. So what we said in one of those psychology sessions that we had, when we would, sit and we would reassure each other in our commitment that we're going to be here till Milosevic is brought down. After Milosevic is brought down, all bets are off. I may become a politician. I may become one of us became a tycoon. One of us became a advisor to the president. Some of us became like video game designers, whatever. But all bets are off. But until we bring down the regime, we have to have how shall I say, an agreement that we're going to stick together. And that required a lot of effort, to maintain that. And these psychology sessions were an important component of that. But it also, and I think it's important to talk about that as well, although, I never thought that we were going to touch this segment. I think it's what we needed to reveal at these psychology sessions, and at the very first stage, when we were just brainstorming to form the movement, we were asking each other, what's your personal motivation in this? Just let's be open about it. Because if we know what's the personal, there's not going to be disappointment. We're not going to be disappointed in each other. And what we actually learned by talking to each other is that most of us, if not all of us, but pretty much, significant majority, had the same motivation why we're in this. It wasn't money, it wasn't power, it wasn't, I don't know what else. It was glory. And that actually proved to be a very healthy, how shall I say, urge. We wanted to be glorious. We wanted to do something and stand in the middle of the street and say, look what we did. It's like, it's us, 22-year-old kids. We did this.